So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today. We're here again with GPS, God's Prophetic Surprise. So I'm Pastor Dan, they call me in my church, Pastor at Garden Grove, and we have our panel here. Thrilled again to have Dr. Tonstad back with us, fresh from working on the book of Revelation and writing hopefully a book. We started last week with the subject of the Church of Sardis and the whole thing where it says you have the reputation of being alive, but you're really dead. So we sort of opened up the subject of what does it mean for church to be dead, church to be alive. Someone years ago brought me the movie, which was in Danish, I think, at the beginning, Babette's Feast. I'm sure you've all seen that. This is, boy, 20, 30 years ago now. Where these people are worshiping the old man's religion on this island. And then he passes away, and this group is old, and they're angry, and old grudges. And then at the end of the movie, there's Babette's Feast, where she comes and just makes this incredible feast, and they're happy and alive. And they're comparing these two kinds of religion. And they began to be loving and forgiving and happy. The feast, Christianity is supposed to be a feast. Church is supposed to be alive. So we just said, let's go around the circle and say, what does a church that's alive look like? What does a church that's dead look like today? So try to be as concrete as you can, what you think are signs. So you do dead first or alive first? What makes a church look dead? What would you say? She was telling us before you start with you. You just went to a church that said it was a good church, but didn't have much life to it.
But so here's the thing, is that I think it's totally based on the person and what brings them natural life. So my generation tends to enjoy the more upbeat song service, something that gets you moving and like just gets your blood pumping and like just because you just want that energy first thing, something to get you moving. And it was so interesting because someone I just met invited me to go to church with them, and since it was on Sunday, I was like, great, I can go and just worship and be, I'm a pastor, so typically I have to be running around like a crazy person, so sure, I'll go with you. And this guy's a producer in Hollywood, so I figured it would be this like crazy, like choreographed church, with like a crazy band and like smoke or
lights
like
and
I don't know what I was expecting. He just said
it's like that.
Lots of graphics.
Lots of graphics and like.
So what was it, real quick?
It was this Presbyterian church. It was beautiful, really well put together, and it was Communion Sabbath, and they had a nice screen, but really they had a praise team, and it was pretty, and they had a traditional choir, and just very traditional. And I was just kind of taken aback because everyone around me was very into it, and it was a successful church, but it was not at all what I was expecting, because I was expecting him, because he's my age, to be like wanting, because he's a producer in Hollywood.
Would he say it was a church that was alive? Would he feel life from it?
He felt like it was the best church he could possibly be part of.
You didn't feel that?
No, and I liked it, and I think it's a church that is very alive, but it was not what I was expecting when he was referring to it. And so it's just this interesting...
So it doesn't have to be Hillsong, rockin' church to be alive. There's other ways to be alive.
Absolutely.
It could be liturgical, could be...
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what I think threw off my groove, is just this expectation, I think is...
Okay, who's next? Real quick. Go ahead, John.
Well, for me, the bottom line is it real? I'd say dead church is where people are going through the motions, where they're singing the same songs, they're doing the same things, preaching, same Bible readings and stuff, but it's just a facade. It doesn't impact on the rest of their week. It's not from the heart, it's not real.
Meeting a need. That's what I mean to say.
Okay. So it could be quiet and be real.
Is it real?
It could be wild and crazy and not be real.
Yeah, that's right. Is it real, or is it just something we do to impress other people? And of course, the realness in church would be whether God is there and is being truly engaged in that community. And where the community is leaning on God for their life, it'll be alive. If you're trying to make life, well, you can't really do that too well unless you're a parent.
Sometimes we do think we can recipe it. We can take what other churches are doing and bring their same elements and put it together and think we will now be an alive church, and it's just a fake. Go ahead.
So I work as a physician, or have worked as a physician, and I can tell whether a patient, a person, is dead or alive.
Oh, good.
That's kind of basic to my profession.
Okay, so now you got to come into our side.
Yeah, but I cannot do that when it comes to churches. I don't think myself competent to be a diagnostician of a church. And especially when we read this text in Revelation, because here is a church that has a reputation of being alive. So someone must think that this church is a good place to be. You know, it has a good, you know, feel to it, as it were. So how do you diagnose the condition of a church as a human being, as a member? I'd be quite reluctant to do that. But I will try just one element that I think might be relevant, and that is, you know, not service, not preaching, not this or that. Do these people care about each other? You know, do they take care of each other? Do they care about their community? It seems to me that would, you know, be a criterion that might just be implied or maybe even explicit in the messages to the 7 churches.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I was just going to say that the ultimate definition of a live church is one that God recognizes to be alive, not us.
Yeah.
But I like your criterion because it goes back to Jesus, doesn't it? Everyone will know you're my disciples. Everyone will know that this thing's alive when you love one another.
Yeah.
So that's the criterion that we can maybe judge if it's real or not.
If you showed up you've been a pastor a long time too, if you were to show up at a church and it was dead by you and most people's criteria, what would you do to put life into it?
Oh, I was just going to say find another church. But,
no, you've been assigned. This is where you are. You've moved, you open the doors, and you say, wow.
Well, if you're assigned as a pastor to a dead church, the only hope for your ministry would be that you would have life in Jesus Christ. And if you have life in Jesus Christ and you live, you know, you live the love and the discipleship, it'll rub off on others.
What if you're a layman and you can't control the preaching, you can't control things, you're just one person and you know this church should be much better.
You can still live the Christ life.
You're full of Jesus and just be a voice of life.
If necessary, you know, go get that some other source. I remember a person who was the elder of a large church, you know, where I raised my kids, and just stuff wasn't working for him. And so one Sunday he said, I'm going to go off to the Baptist church and see maybe there's some hope there. And he shows up and the pastor isn't there, and the deacon's reading out of some stuffy sermon of the past, and he thought, yeah, this is it, I'm done. And then suddenly that deacon says, I don't even know what I'm reading here, but I know one thing, God is able. And he read some more. He said, I don't agree with that. He said, I don't know where this guy got that, but I know this, God is able. and somehow that phrase connected. So when it's real, even if you don't know what you're doing, even if you're reading some boring stuff, if it's real, other people can begin to get a taste of it.
I know people ended up in hard situations. I was thinking of a sister-in-law, you know, my brother-in-law's a dentist, she's a nurse, Loma Linda trained right here. Now in a little church on the coast of Oregon, 7, 8 people, a doctor had money, he built a church, and there's 7 people. And they're the young couple, Loma Linda, new, alive, full of huge church here. And all of a sudden, they're fighting over potluck, and you know, they didn't bring the right kind of food, and you had the wrong, you know, menu and recipe. And evidently, there was a shoving and pushing over this plate of food. And finally, they shoved that plate of food, and it fell in her lap, this dish that she had made. And they said, we don't want not your food, you have cheese in it, or whatever was wrong. And she walked away and said, I'll never go back. And has never gone back to church in the 30 years since then.
Oh, wow.
What do you do in a place with 7 people, you're 30, 40 miles from any other church, and your church is dead? And Jesus writes a note and says, I wish you were alive. How do you do that? You know, we're part of a church that's alive. It's not perfect for sure, but it's alive. You go there, most of the things, there's a life going on. And there is love, and there is a band, and there is music, and there is small groups studying Jesus and doing mission trips. But what if you have not that? I also wanted to talk to you about if this is your own personal spiritual life. In your own world, whatever you had before was alive, but the phrase is you're spiritually burnt out. You're just dead inside. What do you do with that? Anyway, I read a parable that you wrote a little bit, your own story. There's times when you didn't feel real thrilled with everything. But How did you deal with that? You had a percentage thing.
Yeah, I remember one situation where about 20% of me wanted to do what was right, and about 80% of me was mad at God. And
not mad at the church, mad at God.
No, mad at God, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, the 20% of me definitely didn't feel good about the 80%, and I don't like being split up like that. So I gave attention to the 20% and said, you know, Lord, I'm going to give you that 20%, and you take care of the rest. And a couple of days later, I think it's more like 30-70. And a few days after that, it was kind of 40-60. And I remember one night I was just kneeling by the bed, and I think I hit 51%. It just sort of felt like it went across the line.
Were there certain behaviors you were doing?
And the rest of it just blew apart. Well, to be honest, I was dating a young lady who has now become my wife, but she decided to move back to Minnesota from New York. And I was mad at God about that. And this is not evangelistic reality. This actually happened at 11 o'clock at night on the 11th day that she was gone. I was praying, and I felt that sense. 51% of me says, Lord, if she never comes back, I'm okay with that. I'm going to serve you the rest of my life. And it's just like, boom, 100%, just like that. And the phone rang. It says, I have a collect call from Pam. Would you accept the charge? Of course not. Hadn't heard for 11 days. And the call was basically, hey, my mom's out of money. You think you could get us back to New York? We're ready to come back. And, you know, is that just a coincidence? I don't know. But for me, it was very meaningful and indicated God's overarching on the relationship.
You've had other times in, whatever, 40 years since then. Have you... When things are flat, do you go Bible reading more, or read books, or go music, or nature, or go to a group, or do you have certain things that have helped you bring life back to your soul?
Well, absolutely. Bible study is a very, very critical one, and I like to do Bible study while walking. You know, fresh air, exercise, sunshine, all the rest of that. You can have it on the phone now. That's so awesome. You can, even in the dark, you can walk in the dark and you got your phone. You can meditate on a text, so that can be... And for me, particularly, really early in the morning is what helps.
Everyone has to find their way of where they find life again.
Yeah. But at this stage in my life, I'm so busy with the things of God, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about whether I'm alive or dead. I'm just doing what's in front of me and being thankful that I have this ministry.
I'm going to segue off this percentage idea. You were claiming, I mean, you're a Christian. And I know 20% of you was really at it at that point. What does it mean to be a hypocrite, to say, I am a Christian, I am going around in the name of Christ, I'm part of that church, and yet you're dead, or you're not fully that. Is everyone a hypocrite? What does it mean to not be living up to your profession or the name that you are carrying?
Well, I think that problem, I mean, am I what people see me as being? You know, am I what people think I am? I think the discrepancy between, you know, how we are seen and what we are is a, you know, fundamental human.
And is that all of us? I mean, Jesus criticized certain people for being hypocrites, but are we really all hypocrites to a certain degree?
You don't need to be a hypocrite. You don't need to label it as that. You can just say that that is a fundamental, you know, fracture in human experience, that there is some, you know, we wish to be more than we are. You know, God expects us to be more than we are too. But you don't need to call that hypocrisy. That would be you know, pastorally and diagnostically misleading. Let me try two specifics. When I was a doctoral student in Scotland, I attended a small Adventist church in a very secular country. There are very few churchgoers. And they got a new pastor. He was very eager. He thought the church was dead. He was extremely well-meaning. But many of those older members had been going to church faithfully and stuck together for decades, 30, 40 years, I would have thought, you know, that pastor would have been wiser to listen and tune in to the faith reality of those members. And some of us now, younger generations, you know, now I'm thinking about that, will they, who think the church is dead, will they be there 30, 40, 50 years from now? Those other guys that we tend to look down on, they have sort of stuck it out. They have been faithful. They have stuck together. That's one specific. Could I do one more specific?
Sure.
The people who grieve, those who have lost their loved one, their situation is often made worse in church. They cannot go to church because church is where people come with their spouses and they feel more alone on Sabbath or on Sunday than they do on other days. It seems to me that could be another criterion for a church that is alive, that they do take care of each other. They do not just come to enjoy church. Church was good today. You know, that's not, that doesn't
It's a great phrase, take care of each other.
That doesn't seem
it's just a great phrase.
Be right.
I have a question, though.
Yes, John.
Sarah, you don't look like a hypocrite. What am I missing?
What do you mean? I mean, I'm sure there are moments I am. I mean, I think
what's that like?
What do you mean?
No, that's an open door.
I think there are moments that it's easier to be a hypocrite because it's easier to go through motions of things and to pretend that you're something you're not. Perhaps like to say like, oh, nobody should do this, or to say go through motions of things and say like, oh, we don't do that, even though maybe you do that. But I think for me, it's just always been easier to just be who I am because I've never been the norm. And so
I have to tell people when they get baptized, I said, people are all going to expect you to now be perfect. I've had people say to kids, you got baptized now, you can't do that. We can still do that, but you can't do that anymore. I said, you're going to make some mistakes, you know. You just have to live with that. We're all 1%. We're all on that pathway 1%.
Yeah, it's
and just open it to say, I'm not 100%. I admit that. I'm trying to be a follower of Christ. I'm growing, but that's what it's going to be.
I've been gifted with the imperfectionist. Like, I am not a perfectionist. My brother is a perfectionist, and I watch him. I remember when he would doodle as a kid, and he would, you know, have his eraser out, and he'd be doodling, and he'd be making this perfect doodle, and I'm like, you know, like, mine's just a disaster zone, and I'm just like having the best time ever, and he's making this most brilliant doodle, and it's like, you know, at the end of the day, like, we're both just doodling, and it's just for fun, and like, I think that that's life, you know, that's the walk with God. I think so often people set themselves up for failure, and they try so often to connect with God in a way that is so perfect, and they want God to love them because they're perfect and they've done everything right and they've gone through all the perfect steps and they've never messed up and they've said all the right things, they memorized this, they've done their devotionals the right way, you know, they woke up at 5 a.m. and they read for an hour before their day got started. And like, I remember someone asking me when I was a pastor the first time, they were like, what time do you get up to do your devotions? And I was like, I'm just going to be very clear. I am not a morning person. There is no way I wake up in the morning to do my devotions because I will be an awful human being when you meet me. You know, like I will wake up, I will do my devotions at night, you know, or like I'll do them midday. Like, but I'm not, and I have to be honest with people. I don't do devotions the way people do devotions. I have to be honest that I'm not what most people
Bottom
are.
line is not when you do them, as long as it results in someone who's alive.
Right, and like that's exactly it. I think that we've messed people up because we've said this is how you find God, this is how you experience Christ, this is how you experience hope, and this is how church is alive, and we've created this box where people have to be perfect. And that's not God. God never said that you have to be this and this and this in order to find him. God said, I am so big and so beautiful and so crazy, ridiculous, that like if you have any of these aspects, like you can totally reach me. And then us as humans are like, oh, so this is what you have to do. And then we destroy people.
You know what I found to be the most life-giving thing one can do in a church is to admit when you're wrong.
Yes.
Because that liberates other people to tell the truth about themselves.
Yep.
You can't undo hypocrisy. It's natural. Except by a miracle of God, and a miracle of God that enables you to simply tell the truth about yourself and all of the flaws. and that liberates everybody else to begin doing the same.
Yeah.
I've had people be so thankful to me. I thought they were going to throw me out because now they find out that the pastor is flawed. I told a story about being angry with it. No, we're glad. We have that all the time. We didn't know you ever had that.
Well, what does the text say? It's in 1 John. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive them.
Yes.
What does it mean, confess your sins? It means telling the truth about yourself.
Be truthful.
So an issue of priorities here again, just to make it specific. I was quite unnerved by the example you gave a while ago about that the food sort of falling into someone's lap who has brought, you know, and bringing a gift to the church. When I was an intern here in Loma Linda, I had a patient at Riverside once who was a recent arrival from Vietnam, and they were very grateful for what we had done for them. So when the person recovered, they invited me to their home. And there was, you know, I prefer vegetarian food, a non-meat diet, but there was not a single thing there that, you know, in the Bible's thing about clean and unclean foods, you know. So am I going to relate to this person's hospitality by saying, no, I'm sorry, I don't eat that, I don't eat that? Did I eat unclean meats? I did. May I have eaten pork? I probably did. You know, I thought the people with whom I eat are more important than what I eat.
Exactly.
Do I think there is a biblical argument for that? I do. You know, do I think churches would be better if we thought that the people with whom we eat are more important than what we eat? You know, whatever gradations you may have there.
Wow.
So,
good for you.
Somebody told that story about me anonymously to you know, somewhere years ago, and they thought this was a very bad person.
You know, we can probably arrange a communion or a rebaptism for you.
I know that Sigve is a strong voice for healthy eating, and particularly vegetarianism, because he cares deeply about animals and does not like animals being slaughtered and hurt and manufactured in factory farms and stuff. So I think this testimony is very powerful because it does tell us that not all things are at the same level, you know. And I remember a lady that we all respect a lot who said, if you're not sure what the right thing is, err on the side of mercy. Maybe at that moment he wasn't sure, is God okay if I just eat this stuff that I never eat? And he said, well, err on the side of mercy, you know. And I think if in the end God said, you made a mistake, he'll say that with a smile.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, you made a mistake, but I loved watching you.
I just want to quote the line, you know, that Irenaeus said years ago, where he said, the glory of God is a man fully alive. It does not mean a particular style, you know. Some people are emotional, and they're going to be one way of doing worship and God and Christianity. Other people are going to be like the church that you went to yesterday, or someone else that studies in the morning, someone studies at night. Some people are musical, some people are nature people, some people are face shining, other people are serving in the back room, and they're alive. You know? So there's all kinds of ways to be alive, and only God knows, as you said. Where the EKG monitor is the heart alive or not? Only God knows the heart. Anyway.
Can I make a suggestion? Yes. Because we're running out of time. I was wondering, why don't we just read through Sardis? The whole thing, and then maybe each of us give a thought on
Can we just go with verse 4? We only read the first 3 verses before. Can we go from 4 on?
Yeah, sure.
You all have an English. I can read one, and you read the next. I'll read verse 4. Yet you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their clothes. They will walk with me dressed in white, for they are worthy. Verse 5, John?
All right. The one who conquers will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels.
Hear you who have ears to hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
So these people, there's this remnant, or we talked about that in your notes, that are, they are alive. Even though there's spiritual death all around them, somehow they are still spiritually alive. And they're in white. We will have white elsewhere in the book several times, but can we get the whiteness started? What does it mean to be dressed in white? Right here in this passage. We just got 3 minutes left. Can you do this very quickly?
Well, the thing about white clothes is, number one, it's very obvious when they're clean. And number two, it's very easy to see when they need to be cleaned.
Okay.
So a nice thing about white clothes is it exposes to the light the reality of the garment. A brown robe might be very, very dirty, but it looks just fine. So dressed in white, I think, would be a metaphor of living your life in a transparent fashion so that mistakes can be seen, but also when you're doing it right, it can also be seen and be an inspiration to others.
Amen. I grew up somehow with the idea that white was something you put on the first day you become a Christian, that it was justification, if I use our theological words. Is this justification? The moment you come to Christ, you are filthy rags, Isaiah says, and all of a sudden you are robed in the robes of Christ's righteousness, and it's justification. Or is this sanctification? These are people actually living holy, pure, worthy, it says worthy, godly lives. Which is it in white in Revelation?
I was in deep thought about something else. Can I say it?
Say it.
I just wonder if the people to who, you know, these various groups here, the alive group, the dead group, do they know who is who? Does the community know about itself? Well, now he's talking to you. You are the dead part. And now he's talking to me, because you have a few names there in Sardis, and they are worthy because they, you know, if they don't know, I mean, if we as a community do not know who is who, you know, we are, you know, in some ways in trouble. In some ways,
I mean, like we don't know, we're not self-aware of where we're standing ourselves, right?
Yes, exactly.
Laodicea for sure says that,
exactly,
that they don't know.
You know, so exactly, because then we cannot, in our daily life with each other, we cannot, you know, relate to each other as though you are the dead and I am the alive.
I may think I'm alive, but I'm really the dead one. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to answer the whiteness quick in 30 seconds? John, take a crack at that quickly.
There's a school in Indonesia that all the buildings have white tiles. It's a place where it rains like twice a day all year long. And it's very muddy, and people are tracking mud in all the place. And somebody came from outside and says, "What is wrong with you people? Why do you use white tiles here?" You know what the cleaning people told them? So we can see the dirt. And I think the core of being alive spiritually is to know the truth about yourself, and that there's nothing in yourself that can save you or make you right with God. When you know the truth about yourself, you throw yourself on Him, and that makes all the difference.
It makes us white. How's that for our close for the Church of Sardis? There is much more. We could have asked 10 more questions here and had a lot of time. Someday you'll read the books by these two men that will come out. Well, we hope you'll come back next week. We will do the city of Philadelphia, brotherly love, where Jesus says, "Behold, I have set before you an open door that no man can shut." So we love it as a GPS. Please come back with us next week. God bless you.